Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Salute Your Sports. Common Enchev here with Tom Castleman. Another bye week for Drew, but we're talking Final Four today. A lot of blue blood squaring off, including that big UNC Duke showdown for the first time ever in a tournament. Some drama on the ladies' side as well. Plenty of basketball on the show. We've got NBA hoops on the docket as well. I am definitely looking forward to a great show today, Tom.
Absolutely. And the March Madness isn't just restricted to the collegiate level in the NBA, particularly in the Eastern Conference. We have four teams within a half game of the number one overall spot, something that's going to be potentially very crucial as a lot of evenly matched teams, who's going to get home court advantage and where they're going to finish in the respective standings, who's going to potentially face a dangerous Brooklyn team coming out of those play-in games. So we got a lot to cover in this week for sure, but lots of round ball. Going to be definitely an enjoyable show.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Let's get started with the first one. I mean, what are we thinking about this Duke UNC showdown? Here's some statistics on this game. Since Coach K took over at Duke, 50 wins for Duke, 49 wins for UNC, the 100th meeting between Duke and UNC since Coach K took over. And what is his last Final Four? They split the meetings this season. Absolutely wild. First time ever they're meeting in the tournament. And that is because something you talked about, Tom. So did Coach K in his press game conference, post game conferences as to why they haven't met. They like to set the regions so that teams from the same conference don't meet until later on in the tournament. So that's just why it's happened. Like they wouldn't really meet until the Final Four because they're typically in opposite regions. They were in the 1991 Final Four, but they didn't meet up in the championship. So this will be definitely a really good game. Duke is a 4-point favorite going in, but it's going to be close. What do you think about this showdown, Tom?
Yeah, I think in this type of showdown, throw out the line, so to speak. I mean, there's obviously the betting angle to it, but this is arguably the most momentous non-championship game perhaps ever in NCAA tournament history, simply because, as you said, it's the first time that these two teams are meeting. And as if that isn't already big enough with, the Tobacco Road rivalry between the two of them, it's also Coach K's last dance. Also, UNC bumped off Duke for Coach K's last home game. So each we're just building parfaits here. We're adding level after level after level to the storyline in this game. I don't know how much more storybook it can really get, except that Coach K and Duke goes on to win this game. And I think they have a pretty good chance of doing so. I mean, UNC certainly has played at a really, really high level so far in this tournament. But I believe that in their 3 tournament games so far, I think Duke has been shooting 55 from the field, 35 from 3, 75% from the line. I think I have that right. That's from Sarah Spain, an ESPN writer. And I don't think any other team has done that in NCAA tournament history. So they've been playing really well themselves at the right time and kind of sort of flying under the radar on the hard court simply because of everything that is the Coach K story. So the way Duke has been playing, I mean, UNC is kind of like the bigger play story because they're the 8th seed in the Final Four and everyone they had to beat as far as their road. But don't discount Duke and how well they've been playing, especially with an NBA lottery pick on their roster.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good game. You're giving a lot of credit to Duke, as you should. They're playing incredibly well in this tournament. A lot of credit has to go to UNC. I mean, they're cruising through this tournament. They had basically a bad 10-minute stretch against Baylor when they had one of their star players get kicked out of the game for something that he shouldn't gotten kicked out of. They had a guy foul out, so they had a bad 10-minute stretch. Outside of that, they pretty much, I mean, they had a close game against UCLA, yes, but they took care of business late. They blew out their opening round opponent. They had a blowout against, I know it's St. Peter's, but I mean, everyone else was losing to St. Peter's. So UNC is on cruise control in this NCAA tournament. So both teams truly going into this game playing their best ball. They have been probably the 2 most impressive teams in this tournament. I know we have Villanova and Kansas on the other side, but I think these have been the 2 best teams this tournament. And I think a lot of it is going to go down to rebounding. You look at UNC, traditionally a powerhouse in rebounding, no different this season. 5th in the nation, averaging 40.6 rebounds per game. Duke's not too bad either, though. 37.8 rebounds. You look at the earlier season meeting when Duke clobbered UNC by 20 at UNC. They actually out-rebounded UNC 40-24 in that game. The second game, which UNC won, 37-34 edge for UNC in rebounds. So if Duke can keep the rebounding margin within 2 to 3 or win it, then Duke should win this game. I think they have the best star in Paolo Banchero, which you mentioned, a lottery pick. Could be a top 5 pick. He has a big Final Four. Could even be the number 1 overall pick. Certainly Chet Holmgren didn't deliver in the tournament for Gonzaga. Drew Timme was actually the biggest star for them. So Banchero's great. I think Duke has a little bit better perimeter players than UNC. UNC's got a little bit better big guys. Banchero is more of a small forward, but he kind of plays on the perimeter. So I think it's going to be a close game. Rebounding will be key. Another key factor to look into is who's going to be that guy off the bench, because both teams rely a lot on their starters. Starters play big minutes. They kind of both run 6 to 7 men who play real minutes. They don't really have very deep rotations, so look out for foul trouble. Look out for that. But I'm going to give Duke the edge for a couple of reasons. I think simply they're a little bit more athletic. I think they're a little bit better scoring team. They've got the best player in the game in Paolo Banchero, and they have the best coach. I know you talked about this earlier in the NCAA tournament. Coaching matters. Well, Hubert Davis has been a great assistant for many years. He did win a championship as an assistant with UNC. He's been to the Final Four before. However, Coach K has been to 13 Final Fours now. He's won 5 national championships. He knows what it takes when you get down to this stage of the tournament. Mr. Hubert Davis has not experienced that at that level. I know they had that bad stretch against Baylor where they kind of gave the game away. I don't know how much that goes on him, but I feel like he maybe could have gotten his guards together and said, hey, don't go over there in the corner. So I do like Duke. I think given a 4-point spread, ironically, I think this is a game that goes down to the last possession, and a game that is a 1-possession game with having the better coach, the more experienced coach. I do think that matters. Also, like I said, UNC doesn't have as good of guards. Duke has Banchero who can go and make a play for himself. Like if you're going to look for a guy to isolate at the end of the game, I want Banchero. UNC's leading scorer couldn't make a free throw against UCLA. So keep that in mind. Perimeter play and coaching in a close game late matters. Ironically, I think UNC is going to cover the 4-point spread. I think it's that close. I actually like UNC to cover, but Duke to win outright. It is definitely a toss-up, though. UNC winning would not surprise me one bit.
Absolutely. And that's just going to add to that whole rivalry of, the story that's pretty much going to be told for generations on that side of the basketball world is definitely going to be exciting. As you mentioned, Common, 13 Final Fours for Coach K. That passes John Wooden for the most overall. I believe just recently got to 100 career wins. I'm not sure if that was Michigan State or Texas Tech for Coach K. So
in the tournament, 100 career wins in the tournament.
Correct.
I think it was the Tech game, but yes.
Yeah, correct. In the tournament specifically. So nobody else has that many Final Fours and total wins in the tournament. He's won a bunch of titles as well. Like, let's just talk like a little bit legacy-wise. I'm sure we'll be able to wax poetic next show as well about Coach K if he is in fact in that title game. If he does in fact win that title game, we'll be able to talk in a lot more depth on that as well. But how important is it that Duke wins this game versus winning a title in general, just making it to a title game? Where is he kind of standing, and what can this upcoming weekend and upcoming Monday do for him?
First off, I think it's going to do absolutely nothing. And obviously, I do think there is the argument. I know that's the way you're going to go. Different eras, hard to compare, and that definitely is hard to disagree with. But for the sake of resumes and best coaches ever, I mean, Coach K has the most wins in the regular season and the tournament. He's got the most Final Fours. He definitely has the resume as the second best coach ever. However, he has 5 titles. Even with 6, he would still be behind John Wooden, who has 10 national championships. And keep this in mind, John Wooden actually in his career has won 80.4% of his games. Coach K, 76.4. So Wooden coached 46 to 48 in Indiana and 1948 to 1975 at UCLA. And then Coach K coached from 1975. Ironically, Coach K's first season was John Wooden's last season. Talk about that torch getting passed. I know that's not how it was perceived at the time, but it is kind of interesting to think about. So Coach K, 85 or 75 to 80 at Army, 1980 to present at Duke. So the reason why Coach K has more wins than John Wooden and more tournament wins, etc., is simply because Coach K plays in an era where you play more games, both in the regular season and in the tournament. So John Wooden, of any coach who has more than 500 career wins, has, of course, the best winning percentage of all time. So their resumes, as far as total Final Fours, stack up pretty evenly. But John Wooden actually has him beat in win percentage. So Coach K has the more wins because of the more games being played. So I'll say this about John Wooden. The argument for Coach K would be that John Wooden had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton. You can make a case for those being the 2 greatest college players of all time. Pete Maravich, probably my number 1, but right behind him, you can go Kareem, you can go Bill Walton, you can make, obviously, Will Chamberlain's up there, but I feel like pretty much every list of greatest college basketball players I've ever seen, those 2 appear in the top 5. So that obviously helped him a lot. But, you know, Coach K's had a lot of great players. He's had the chance to recruit. Back then, recruiting was different, so UCLA was such a brand name. But I'll say this, before John Wooden got there, UCLA had 0 national titles. It's the same case for Duke. 0 national titles before Coach K got there. So they both put their programs on the map. But UCLA, 1 national title since John Wooden. Just 1. So I think John Wooden has a lot to say for his greatness. So it is hard to compare eras. Yes, I mean, would Coach K have that many titles with some of the players that Wooden had? Maybe, but I would argue if Wooden had some of those lottery draft picks, would he have more than 5 championships? My gut feeling is yes. It is hard to know, but the pyramid of success and the success that Wooden had was incredible. And we see all these upsets. It was, you know, maybe not as many upsets back in the day, but think about this. 7 straight national championships for UCLA, 10 titles in 12 years. They lost 5 games in 7 years. I mean, everyone was gunning for them. And it is hard when everyone's gunning for you. Just ask the Chiefs, you know, in the NFL, ask Barcelona a few years back. I mean, there's a reason why we don't see repeat champions in any sports very often. It's very rare. So for John Wooden to do that, I don't care what talent he had, for him to do it over and over and over and over is remarkable. So it is hard to compare eras. It is hard to give a definitive answer, but that's what we're here to do. We're here to make a pick. So I'm going to say John Wooden because 10 titles is twice more than Coach K. Coach K's 5, and again, a better win percentage. So Coach K can win this one, and he would still be within 4 titles of John Wooden. So I think regardless of what happens this weekend, Coach K to me is number 2 greatest college basketball coach of all time. And that's probably where he's going to be for a long time, unless someone else really challenges him. I mean, one of the guys that could challenge him is Jay Wright, who I really like at Villanova. I'll talk about that in a little bit in the next segment. But yeah, I've got John Wooden number 1, Coach K number 2, and nothing he does this weekend does change that. I'll say this, though, from a legacy perspective, not necessarily from where his spot is. It is interesting if you kind of retire on top. We saw John Elway do that. If Coach K does win a championship in his last season, that's kind of a really special thing. And if he does lose to UNC, think about that. The rival Tar Heels would have beaten him in his last home game at Cameron Indoor Stadium and in his last Final Four. That would have been crazy as well. And he didn't win the ACC championship in his last season, the conference championship. in the tournament rather. So we'll see. A lot of things on the line for sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of like of a similar mind of you in terms of it's really difficult to compare eras because like one and done didn't exist for at all in John Wooden's time coaching, and in playing fewer tournament games, the win percentage is better, but also the chance for upset is quite frankly better too. You don't have to. They didn't have to play, and win 6 games to become champions at the end of those seasons. Still impressive that they won 5 games, but I think it just kind of like lines up the same way that we kind of saw like Lakers and Celtics always going back and forth, kind of like in a similar time period where there just wasn't as much player talent, period, and there wasn't as much player movement as far as changing rosters. I mean, at the collegiate level, everybody played 3-4 years, so you can get a Hall of Famer, somebody that if they were playing like in this era, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would have been a one and done a type of player. So I think like that's where it's really difficult. Like John was the best at recruiting all of that talent and then getting the most out of it. Whereas you look at Coach K, same thing like you're saying of like building a program from scratch, basically. Like he had great talent too. Like let's not like pretend like Christian Laettner, Grant Hill, Jay Williams, like he didn't have Shane Battier, great talent
Carlos
on those
Boozer,
two teams.
JJ
Carlos
Redick.
Boozer, for sure. Like, but it's just like because they're like the game exploded in the 90s as far as just like an awareness and a popularity, more and better athletes got to playing. So like that's why it's impossible for me to like pick one. Like John Wooden is the best of his time. I think Coach K is the best of his time, and as great as Jay Wright is, like there's just so much move. Like the recent part of the specialness of a John Wooden and a Coach K is that they've done it pretty much at one institution. Like they are the institution, you could say. And it's going to be really interesting with John Scheyer where that's going to end up going, if Duke is going to remain as that kind of perennial blue blood, or if there's going to be a drop off, because how can you keep up the same legacy as a Coach K? So I think really it's basically just like on which note does the story end. I think that it ends on a good note if Duke wins the championship, obviously, but even if they lose in the championship game, even if they're runners up, that's still going to be a pretty positive note. Losing in the Final Four specifically to North Carolina, like if they lost to UCLA, fine. If they lost to, I don't know, like, Purdue, fine. But UNC, that borderline makes me think that Coach K would just be like, you know what? Forget everything. I'm coming back. Like I'm not going to end losing to the Tar Heels in the Final Four on like.
Oh yeah.
Like I can't possibly see him going out. Like, and maybe he comes back in like an emeritus role type of thing where it's like John Scheyer's doing like a lot of the in-game stuff, but Coach K still there's like the looming presence because like he's a really competitive person, just period. It's like and like that would just be the ultimate petty. I'm going to be like riveted to this game on Saturday. It's going to be fascinating. But I guess like final answer, they're both number one all time of their respective eras just because basketball is so different. I mean, John Wooden, like they didn't have a 3-point line when he was coaching. Like the game itself is so vastly different. So I'm just going to say like they're both best all time because there's kind of like a fairly decent clear marker between just like what the game of basketball actually was for both of them.
Yeah, and they are completely different eras. They coincided for 1 year, the last and the first of the other guys. So yeah, I mean that's the argument you can make when you compare anyone from a different era. It's a very valid argument. I can't definitively sit here and say that if Coach K coached those UCLA teams, he wouldn't have 10 national titles. I can't sit here and definitively say if John Wooden coached Coach K's teams, would he have more? Would he have less? Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm just saying for the sake of making a pick, I will say the resume of John Wooden. It's just very hard to argue with 10 championships. I mean, how many coaches at any level in any sport have 10 championships? That I think is very, very
rare
impressive.
Company.
So for me, John Wooden is definitely the GOAT. And honestly, yes, part of it is like, yeah, guys aren't transferring. We don't have one and dones. That record may never fall. 10 national titles by one coach. The amount of parity we see out there,
get touched. Yeah,
that record's not falling. At least not in our time. I'll say that for sure.
No, I agree with you on that one. And I don't think like anybody's going to touch like Coach K for like tournament wins or Final Fours or that sort of thing. Like there's just too much movement in the game, in the college game right now, as far as coaches going from program to program. And then also there's just not as much of a tolerance. Like it's really difficult for somebody to get entrenched at a position and be really good for a long time. Like now, if you do, like you're either moving up or you're moving out. So yeah, I just don't think there's going to be any more longevity for people to touch that sort of thing.
Agreed.
All right. Well, that's not the only Final Four game that we have going on this upcoming Saturday. We've got another kind of like old style blue blood in Kansas, a frequent NCAA tournament visitor, a frequent Final Four visitor, but a little lacking on the championships. Whereas you look at Villanova, a program that's had some decent success in earlier years, but particularly since 2016 has been absolutely fantastic as a program. Three championship trips yielding 2 titles, I believe, multiple 30-win seasons. So as much as we talked about kind of like the old history in the last game, we got a lot of recent history coming up in this one. What are your initial thoughts on the Villanova Wildcats and our buddy Jake Schlegel's favorite, Kansas Jayhawks?
Yeah, so my first thought is when we're talking about guys who can challenge Coach K, if there is a guy who can get to those 5 national titles Coach K has, it's Jay Wright. He's got 2 of them already. He's in the Final Four right now. Guess what happened the last 2 times Villanova was in the Final Four? 2016, 2018, they won both of them. And the last time they were a 2 seed in the Final Four, 2016, they won it all. And they had a dominant run in that tournament. Buzzer beater against who else but UNC. Hubert Davis, by the way, the assistant coach at UNC on that season. Ryan Arcidiacono to Chris Jenkins for the win. So as far as this game, Tom, you know this, I've talked about this ad nauseum, but as a sports fan, as someone who follows stats, as someone who makes predictions, bets games, etc., there's been more upsets in the last year and a half in sports, across all sports, quite frankly, than any time I've ever seen before. It just, and you know, the tournament has always been full of upsets. So right now on paper, if everyone's healthy, these 2 teams should be pretty even. But currently on paper right here, not paid on paper, Villanova should lose because their second leading scorer, Justin Moore, is out. However, I'm going to go ahead and pick Villanova to win, and it is because of Jay Wright. It's also because even though I really respect Coach K, and I feel that special storybook ending for him, I am a UNC fan because MJ went there. I really liked Roy Williams. I really liked Ty Lawson and Hansborough on those teams. Really liked Dean Smith, the history of UNC. Probably my second favorite college basketball program behind Mizzou, our alma mater. So I already picked against one team that I like more in the matchups. I can't bring myself to do it too because I think there's going to be at least one of the underdogs has to win with all the upsets we've seen. And we don't really have a heavy underdog. This line also at 4.5 points. So I like Jay Wright and Villanova, and I like Jay Wright because he's the better coach than Bill Self in this game. Maybe it's my Mizzou bias here. Maybe it's the fact that I was a huge Illinois fan right when they had Bill Self, and they couldn't win with his recruits. It was Bruce Weber taking Bill Self's recruits, D. Brown, Luther Head, Darren Williams, taking them to the next level, taking them to the championship game, a place that Mr. Self couldn't do himself. So I actually think Self is a little bit overrated, and it's hard for me to really tell how good of a coach he is because he obviously gets a lot of really good recruits year in, year out. But when we get to the NCAA late stages, he is 4-7 in his career in Elite Eight games, 3-7 before this year when he beat a 10 seed. He is 4-5 now at Kansas, and then he was 0-2 prior to Kansas. A lot of those games have been where Kansas is a favorite, and they've lost as a favorite. I feel like a lot of times where he gets in these games where he's facing, another blue blood, a like-minded team that has roughly the same talent and has another great coach on the sideline, he's been outcoached. It's something we've seen a lot. I'm not saying that he's not a top 10 coach in college hoops. Obviously he is, But I am saying he's not he's not the top 2 coach in the Final Four. I think Coach K is better. I think Jay Wright is better. So I do think that Jay Wright has the edge here. He has seemed to always get the most out of his players and in clutch situations, something that Bill Self, quite frankly, has not been able to do. So, I mean, Jay Wright has 2 national titles since 2016. Self has just one in his career. And I think it wouldn't even been a title if Memphis knew how to make free throws. Like if they didn't miss free throws down the stretch, they didn't foul. Talk about overrated coaches. Maybe Coach Calipari over there in Kentucky. Coach Cal is another guy with great recruiting that hasn't won as much as he should. I mean, if it wasn't for Memphis missing a free throw and then not fouling Kansas when they're up 3 late, Mario Chalmers hitting that 3 at the end, he would have 0 national championships. So I actually think he is honestly one of the most overrated coaches in college hoops. And I think Jay Wright is probably the most underrated. I look at when Coach K leaves, Jay Wright immediately, best coach in college basketball, hands down Jay Wright. He's sharp mind, sharp dressed. He dresses to impress, and he does so on the court. So I really like Villanova. The other thing to think about here is you look at Villanova's best player, Connor Gillespie. He's a 5th-year senior. He was not a star on that team that won the championship, but he was on that team. He did play for that team. He's been there when they won the national championship. You look at Kansas's players, obviously some of their star players a little bit younger. They aren't seniors, maybe sophomores, juniors. What happened last year? Kansas lost in the 2nd round. The year before that, COVID season, no tournament. The year before that, 2nd round exit. So none of these KU players have been in the situation that Connor Gillespie has been in for Villanova. I love the 50-year senior leadership. I also think that Kansas, literally this tournament alone, is not as prepared as Villanova. I mean, they've had one of the easiest tournament runs, if not the easiest in the history of the tournament as far as making the Final Four. They beat a 16 seed. Then they beat a 9 seed without its star player. Creighton, I think it was out without its star player. So that was a cupcake that was really shouldn't have been as close as it was. And Providence, you and I, as clutch as they are, I will agree, they overachieved. Providence, talent-wise, not a 4 seed. Then they go up against Miami, a 10 seed. I mean, this was pretty much a cupcake run to the Final Four for Kansas. You look at Villanova, I think that Houston team was really good. That team, probably even myself, I underrated. That was a great Houston team. Houston is way better than anyone Kansas has beaten this tournament. And I actually think Michigan was playing really, really good ball at the right time. So I think Villanova's more battle-tested in this tournament. They've got experienced players. They've got the best coach in Jay Wright. So I actually really like their defense, too. They've got a great defense, something Kansas hasn't seen in this tournament. I know Texas Tech's got the great defense. They did give Kansas some trouble this season. I do like Villanova because of their defense. And look at Connor Gillespie, 50-year senior, great three-point shooter. He's going to shoot lights out. Jay Wright will absolutely outcoach Bill Self. Villanova gets the mini upset, even without its second-best scorer, Justin Moore.
Yeah, I think Jay Wright's going to have to severely outcoach Bill Self in order for Villanova to even have a chance, because it's one thing to lose your second-best scorer in Justin Moore. It's another thing to lose your minutes leader on a team that currently has 6 guys this season that have averaged double-digit minutes. Somebody's going to have to step up. Who is that player going to be? I think that there definitely can be a, for lack of a better, more concise term, a momentum boost coming out the gate for Villanova. Is like, hey, we're down, one of our best players. We're going to rally around that. And you can do that for a while, but 40 minutes is a long time to play a game of basketball. And quite frankly, we've seen this a lot in the tournament, how teams that aren't necessarily on par talent-wise can hang around for 25, 30, 35 minutes. But we always see in that last segment of the game, the team that is better show out as being better. I think another thing to consider for Kansas is that we haven't seen them play like a full good game of basketball. You know, like the best basketball we've seen was second half against Miami, where they just ran the Hurricanes out of the gym. But beyond that, Kansas isn't even close to playing like firing on all cylinders. So there's still like room for growth. There still might be some possibility that Kansas like looks at that second half and says, "Hey, let's put that together for 40 minutes because that's what we're going to need to bring down a title." Like we've had, they're not going to say it's a cakewalk in that locker room, but like they've had a cakewalk to this point. Like, what does it say if they squander that opportunity? And I think the pressure is going to be very real for them. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be a very unlikable championship game for most of the nation as far as Duke against Kansas. I think that, I mean, if Villanova does win, it's going to come down to somebody steps up that ordinarily doesn't, and that free throws are going to be a big part of the game. I mean, as a team, Villanova shoots 82% from the line. And if there's anything we've seen, is that you need to have some way of getting a steady diet of points up on the board, and being able to hit free throws at a high clip is going to be crucial for that. I don't think Kansas is awful per se at free throws. Let me pull that up really quickly. They shoot, as a team, they shoot 72%, but most of their big players are like 70% and above. So they're not awful at the line. I think that's going to come down as a big thing in the game as well. But just overall on health, on talent, I can't go against Kansas on this one. If more were playing, I'd be much higher on Villanova. But as it stands, losing your second best scorer, your biggest minutes man, that's going to be really tough to replace. They've got a week to figure it out, but I think that's going to be a little too tall timber for the Villanova Wildcats.
Yeah, just a final note on this game, and then I'll get your take on who we think is the champion. I'll say this. You brought up a good point. Something that could help or hurt my argument is that Kansas hasn't been consistent in this tournament. Certainly, if we see the Kansas that was down, I think 6 at the half against Miami, yeah, they're probably going to lose that game. If we see the Kansas that I think, would they win by 26 or something?
It was a pretty wide
lot.
margin.
They outscored Miami by more than 20 points in the second half. We see that Kansas? Yeah, Villanova might be in trouble then. I just think it's obviously a toss-up. Final 4 games tend to be close. Keep this in mind. Villanova, 62 points per game is what they're allowing on defense. They're one of the best defensive teams in the country. So that's what I'm banking on. They play tough defense, and I'm banking on, if it's a close game, as good as Agbaji is, I just trust Gillespie shooting, a great shooter, 50-year senior. I trust Jay Wright to make those adjustments. So I think if it goes down to the wire, I like Villanova because I like their coaching, and same deal as Duke. I feel something about their star player coming up. I think Agbaji is more athletic, probably a better NBA level player. But I do think that Gillespie, of being a 50-year senior that's been through it all, I think he is the guy that's going to make the clutch plays. Great free throw shooter, as you mentioned. And one of the Kansas guys is McCormack, their big man. I don't know. Is he going to make free throws down the stretch? We'll see. Just if it's a close game, I like the intangibles for Villanova. I like their 50-year senior. I like their coach, the free throw shooting that you mentioned. If a team is going to blow the other one out, I do think it might be a little bit more likely for it to be Kansas. But I'll pick Nova. Got to make a pick. I'll pick Nova. Who do you got winning it all? Because we both have Duke. You've got Duke, Kansas. I've got Duke and Villanova.
I mean, I'm for the record, I'm going to be cheering for Villanova.
Same.
I don't like Kansas at all. I don't like Kansas's uniform. I don't like anything about Kansas. I mean, at this point, how can I pick against the storybook ending?
I knew you were going there.
You know, in a small part of me, both, feels a bit foolish for not leaning this way all along. Like I'm the type of person that I've been picking. I think I've picked Gonzaga to win a title more than the field, basically, when it's in my history of picking national champions. Like I always pick Gonzaga because I want to see that happen. But looking at it, it's just like part of me was pre-tournament was a little bit conspiracy theory, and I pushed that away in terms of like Duke's going to get a couple favorable calls here and there. That's going to be the difference between them winning some close games. Definitely didn't see them shooting, 30, 50 from the field, 35 from 3, and 75 from the line. Like that's a big help in making it to the title game. But like Like, how foolish is it that, like, in none of the pools I've been in, I haven't seen a single person pick Duke all the way and just be like, no, of course we're going to get like this storybook ending for Coach K's career. So
Sure.
that's where I'm going with this one. I'm going with Duke over Kansas. I don't think either way it's going to be particularly close. I think it'll be minimum 2 possessions when we get down to like that free throw time that can like make the game
You think
seem
Duke will
more
win
one.
in a comfortably?
I think Duke will win pretty comfortably in the title game. Yeah.
I think it's going to be close regardless because I look at all four of these teams. I think all four of them have, it's not 25, 25, 25, but it is pretty close. I don't look at like any one of these teams being significantly better than the other four. I think it's four blue bloods, four talented teams. They are roughly at the same level, all four of these teams, quite frankly. So nothing would surprise me as much as I might be trashing Kansas. It would not surprise me if they won it all. I'll say this. It's funny you say that Gonzaga's your pick. UNC for the longest time has been my national championship pick.
Sure.
Not every year, but every year they've won, I did pick them. And they've won me multiple brackets, UNC has. And I've had them in the championship game multiple times. And I also had them in that one year where they lost in the buzzer beater against Villanova that took me down in a huge, like 55-person pool. It took me from first place to third place because two people had Villanova in that 55-person pool. A lot had UNC. If UNC had won it all, I would have won a lot. Still won, but it was just, that was like one of those like really cool moments, but also really gut-wrenching for me as a casual UNC fan and for my bracket as well. So it's funny that you're talking about you picking Gonzaga. UNC is typically the team I pick, and I almost picked them over Baylor. Oh, I had Baylor out the next round. Since I had them out so early, I thought about picking UNC in that game as well. I did obviously pick them in the first game. I've actually bet on UNC successfully this whole tournament. I bet them on them in the 8-9 game. I bet on them to cover against Baylor. But I can't pick against UNC because I am going to pick against UNC rather. I do think there's something to be said about that Coach K Duke storyline, and I do think Duke is the best shooting team left the way they're shooting lately, which was maybe a little bit of a question mark earlier this season. So I am going to pick Duke. I've got Duke over Villanova, but I think it's definitely an absolute toss-up. I think Duke has a little bit better athletes than the other three teams. Just pure athleticism. I know that does matter on the court, and now those athletes are also shooting the ball really well. That makes Duke a very, very scary team. So we're going to agree, Tom, which we often do. So this isn't surprising. I do have Duke, but I have them over Nova. You've got them over Kansas. I will say anything that doesn't involve Kansas winning at all, I'm okay with. Even though I'm a UNC fan, I respect Coach K a lot. I think it would be really cool to see him end his career in the right way. As a UNC guy, I think he'd be great as an 8 seed. Hubert Davis's first season, they win it all. By the way, Caleb Love, he was a prospect in the state of Missouri. I actually covered him at the state championship game. Here's a fun little story for you in case UNC and Kansas meet up. Caleb Love played in Missouri. DeJuan Harris on Kansas, which is like the only reason if Kansas is ever going to win, this is the year I want him to win or next year because I love DeJuan Harris. I covered his high school games at Rockbridge High School. Mizzou didn't want him for some reason. So he's now the starting point guard on Kansas. Ironically, Remy Martin's probably better than DeJuan, but DeJuan is the ultimate team player, the great defender. But it was DeJuan Harris against Caleb Love in the Missouri State High School Basketball Championship. Obviously, I'm picking the opposite teams, Duke and Villanova. But if it is Kansas UNC, it's two former guys who played in the state championship game, which DeJuan Harris's team won, in large part thanks to his play, as well as Mr. Isaiah Mosley, who was actually the Missouri Player of the Year, playing for Missouri State, not Kansas. And actually, DeJuan Harris is a great story because he was more of not a low-level recruit, but he was not a 5-star, wasn't a 4-star.
Right.
He was actually originally committed to Missouri State, and the 3 Rockbridge kids were all going to play at Missouri State. 2 of them are there. Jamonta Black, who's the 3rd best guy on that team, not good enough to be on Mizzou. He's where he needs to be. But Isaiah Mosley and DeJuan Harris should both be at Mizzou. But DeJuan, like Bill Self saw something in him that he liked. Like he's a smaller guard. He's not a great shooter, not bad, but if you're going to be a small guard in order to play for Kansas, you think you'd better be a great shooter. But he is a great defender, a great passer of the ball, and a great team player. So I do like DeJuan Harris, but actually compared to Connor Gillespie, I actually think that Villanova does have the edge in that position for sure. So just a little fun storyline if we do see. There's just some storylines with all these teams, like the Jay Wright, Coach K, if they do meet in the final. I kind of mentioned that, like, I feel like Jay Wright is the best coach in college hoops, like passing of the torch, Coach K saying, hey, Jay, here you are, you're the best coach now type deal. So regardless, it's going to be appetizing, and it's going to be blue blood versus blue blood no matter what happens. So we'll both go with Duke, but it's going to be definitely fun to see.
Absolutely. Well, the men's Final Four is not going to be the only one that we're going to have. We're going to have the women's Final Four as well. We're going to have Connecticut and Stanford. We're going to have Louisville and South Carolina. So we haven't talked a ton about this, but looking at our brackets, like, we did pretty all right with picking who was going to be in this Final Four. Comment, what's standing out to you initially on this side of the madness?
Yeah, we're going to agree the same way. By the way, we hadn't been doing great with our championship predictions last year, but we turned to the corner in the Super Bowl. We both had the Rams, and they won. So maybe now that we're at the end of the stretch, maybe we're turning the corner. We'll get Duke, and we're going to go with the best coach again here, the best story. I know we're both going to go the same way. I'm going with UConn to win it all. As far as, obviously they had that crazy double overtime win over NC State. I think it was 91-87 in double overtime. That was a lot of madness last night, actually. We're recording on a Tuesday night. And Paige Bueckers was the difference. By the way, this women's Final Four, it is all chalk. We have 3 1 seeds and UConn as a 2 seed. And the only reason UConn was a 2 seed, quite frankly, is because Bueckers missed a lot of the season. And there was question marks about her health. And UConn had more losses than they would have had she been there. And still people thought they should have been a 1 regardless. I'll say this, we have, without question, the 4 best teams in the country in the Final Four. On the ladies' side, I do think Iowa is in that discussion, but they choked greatly. So I like UConn. Here's a couple of stats for you on UConn. They are 11-0 in national championship games. So they get there, they win it. But they have lost their last 4 semifinal, Final Four appearances, which means that they haven't won a title now in 4 or 5 years, whatever the mark is. So it is kind of funny to think. I heard this morning, and I had to pause for a second. I got to look this up, but I heard that Gino's been to 14 straight Final Fours, but hasn't won a ring in 5 years, which is interesting to think about. So I'm going to go, as far as the 2 matchups, I'm going to go UConn to win in their matchup against, I believe UConn's playing Stanford, right? So correct. Stanford, I think, is the defending national champs, but I like UConn because Paige Bueckers is back. She scored 15 points in the 2 overtime periods in that 4-point double OT win, 27 points, 10 of 15 from the field, 6 of 7 from the line. She is, if not the best women's player in the game, certainly the second best. Obviously, Caitlin Clark is great, but Bueckers is the best one left. So give me UConn over Stanford because of her. Then I'll take South Carolina over Louisville. Aliyah Boston's a beast down low, walking double-double. Only 2 losses all year for South Carolina. One of them was against Mizzou when Mizzou was shorthanded without its best players because of COVID. And they beat South Carolina anyways. So that would set up a UConn-South Carolina final. And I'm going to go with UConn. Same deal as the men's side. I think Paolo Banchero is the best men's player left in the tournament, and Coach K is the best men's coach. On the ladies' side, Gino Auriemma is the best coach. Paige Bueckers is the best player. Duke and UConn, about as blue blood as it can get on the men's and ladies' side, and both haven't won in a minute. They haven't won in a minute. So with all these upsets that we've seen in sports, maybe it's time for a blue blood team to win. And they're both ironically 2 seeds in this tournament, which then you can kind of argue like, oh, well, you're picking a favorite, but they're not really a 1 seed. So I'll take UConn to win the tournament. On the ladies' side, Paige Beckers is going to ball out, and I'll actually try to watch it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I was working during that double overtime game. Didn't get a chance to watch it, but should be some really fun basketball on the ladies' side as well.
Absolutely. I had UConn in my bracket winning it all. I'll admit I do feel nervous about it. It's one of those things where I mentioned, hey, this is why I'm picking UConn at the beginning of the tournament, is that they were in the Bridgeport region. They basically had a de facto home crowd advantage, and even with that, goes to 2 overtimes against a very talented North Carolina squad, an NC State squad, more specifically. So I gotta admit, I do feel nervous about UConn going up against a really, really strong Stanford team, because of course Stanford is always a really, really strong team. So for the sake of sticking with that prediction, I'm still going with UConn to win that matchup and to win the title overall. Gotta admit, I don't feel great about that one though. With the way that they played, I mean, played pretty well, but definitely show that they were a pretty close team with NC State, and they got to beat 2 more teams that are like that with Stanford, and then presumably South Carolina. I think I have them over Louisville as well. I think it'll be fairly close because, again, it's the Final Four. There should be no blowouts at this stage of the game, no matter if it's men's or women's side of the bracket. But I think I'm going to go UConn over South Carolina, and I know Drew's going to probably be sticking with his South Carolina over UConn pick. Sure. Just making sure his Final Four, his championship game is represented as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. And by the way, I think that line on that UConn game against NC State was UConn -4. They won by 4. So it was a wash if you bet on that game.
Mm-hmm.
And look for a lot of those lines to be 2 to 3 points. Actually, I haven't even seen the opening line. I'm really curious to see if UConn.
Oh, I'll touch on it. I'll touch on it. I'll touch on it later. Don't worry.
Oh, you'll touch on it later. Okay. So I'll have to wait to find out that opening line in that Final Four matchup in that UConn game. But it's going to be fun. The tournament has been great on both sides. The ladies' tournament actually had a lot more upsets than years past. But when we got to the Final Four, it was definitely chalk, 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 as it always tends to be. So, and even on the men's side, we do have UNC as an 8 seed. I know we only have one seed, but it does feel kind of like how I said, less upsets. UNC, obviously, once they got past Baylor and UCLA, they were heavily favored against St. Peter's. A lot of the favorites in the Elite Eight did actually advance to the Final Four, with those 1 seeds being knocked off, obviously, in the Sweet 16. But we have a lot of madness in the NBA as well, so more basketball to talk about. I know we've talked about this a lot, the MVP race, so we'll hit on that after next week when the season is done. But I did see this. They polled some NBA guys and reporters who interviewed executives, and Jokic is now the favorite over Embiid. And now the betting line has them as tied for first for best odds for MVP. So that will be fun to track. And what seed the Sixers get may actually have a lot to do with where Embiid finishes in the race, which is crazy because one game may be the difference between a 1, 2, 3, and 4 seed. The Heat are first in the East right now, but playing by far the worst basketball of any of the other contenders. And we have the Bucks, we have the Celtics and the Sixers, all 1 game back of Miami for that 1 seed. And we are recording on a Tuesday night right now. So people will see this after this game ended, but we do have 76ers and Bucks playing tonight, which will be huge for the standing. So there's a lot of layers to this. Obviously, the Brooklyn Nets potentially could be a 7 or 8 seed in the play-in game. A lot of layers there. But I'm going to start off with, before we say what seed should you play for or whatever, who do you think is going to be the 1 seed in the East? Seed them 1 through 4, if you want, Tom.
Okay, so for this, I might have to go a little bit more in depth and schedule, but my initial gut feeling, and actually I'm going to kind of tie this in storyline wise.
Sure.
You mentioned it being like kind of a two-person race between Jokic and Embiid. If the Milwaukee Bucks secure the number one seed in the Eastern Conference,
Giannis.
Giannis could very well win a third MVP award. So if you're one to dabble in that sort of thing as far as futures go, that can be an option for you because he's certainly been playing out of his mind this season.
Not to mention Jason Tatum, who I think is getting a little too much respect, perhaps. But his name has been thrown in that ring as well. If the Celtics get the one seed,
yeah, no. I think I like the Bucks to get the number one seed in the East because looking ahead, they've got a game. They've got a couple tough games for sure coming up with road at Philadelphia, road at Brooklyn. I think they can probably beat Philadelphia tonight. I don't think we're going to get to locks of the week in time, but I would take Bucks +1 on the road if one were looking into that sort of thing.
Okay.
But they're closing out with games where they're facing Chicago, a team that they have dominated. Boston already eliminated. Cleveland, a team with whom Milwaukee matches up very, very well. And then they've got games where like I said, they're playing Philadelphia, they're playing Boston. They got
a tough schedule, Tom.
It's a tough schedule, but they have the opportunity to absolutely solidify that they are going to be the number one overall seed. So if I had to go for seeding, I would say Milwaukee 1, probably Miami 2, 76ers 3, Celtics 4. I think that's how it goes. I think the Celtics are going to have a bit of a falling off because their center tore his meniscus and is going to be out, I believe, for the rest of the season. So I think they're going to fit right into that 4 spot. So I'd probably go Milwaukee, Philly, and then Milwaukee, Miami, and then Philly.
It's interesting you say that because I actually disagree with you on this for several reasons. First off, I think it's wide open. All 4 of these teams, obviously, anyone can be seated elsewhere. And I didn't even look into the tiebreakers because a lot of them play each other. I haven't looked at those either, yeah. A lot of them play each other, so those tiebreakers could definitely change. My gut feeling is that I think it's going to be the 76ers with the 1 seed because I think they've got by far the easiest schedule. They've got a really easy schedule. They host the Bucks tonight at home. I actually think Philly wins tonight against the Bucks because I think it means more to Philly to get that 1 seed. I think it's more important for them. We saw Milwaukee, as a 3 seed make the finals and win it all. And all those years where Milwaukee was the 1 seed, they didn't win it all. So I think it would be more important for Philly. They've got a pretty easy schedule. They play the Pistons, one of the worst, if not the worst team in the league. They play the Hornets, who are not great, battling for the playoffs. They play the Cavs, who are decent, but I think they're better than the Cavs. The Pacers, who aren't great. The Raptors, who aren't great. The Pacers again, and the Pistons. So the 76ers schedule is really, really easy. I also think Joel Embiid, obviously, is hunting that MVP. He's going to be very motivated. So I actually think Philly wins tonight against Milwaukee. I think it's a toss-up, but I do like Philly at home. So I think the Sixers are going to get the 1 seed. And then I look at, as far as the 2 seed, I actually think it might be the Celtics. It'll be between the Celtics and Bucks, I think. But I think the Bucks schedule is pretty hard. They still have the 76ers, the Nets, the Mavericks, the Celtics. I mean, that is a brutal schedule for Milwaukee down the stretch. And then Miami, I think, is 4-6 in their last 10. They have not been playing good ball. So I look at the schedule, and the Celtics schedule is pretty tough too. They play the Heat, they still have the Bucks, and they have the Grizzlies. And then the Heat obviously also play them that I mentioned are playing bad. So schedule-wise, if we're going to go by schedule, it definitely should be Philly with the 1 seed.
Yeah, I'm flipping that.
Win tonight. So give me the Sixers with the 1 seed, and then the 2 seed. It's going to be hard. I honestly 2 through 4, I can see them either way. But I am going to go with the Bucks getting the 2, just because I think they are generally of those 4 teams, those are the 2 best teams. I feel like that will come down to it. And then I will say the Celtics will be the 3, and the Heat are going to end up as the 4, just because I think they've just played so bad lately that even though they're a game ahead, things are really spiraling for them. They just beat a really bad team last night to stop their 4-game losing streak. So I know they had that little like dust up too in the huddle. I feel like Eric Spoelstra will figure things out. But when I'm looking at the rosters of those 4 teams, I think Miami has the worst roster. I think it's like Philly and Milwaukee have the 2 best rosters, and then probably Celtics are third because they do have Tatum and Brown. I mean, you look at Miami, like Jimmy Butler's pretty good. I know Lowry's good, Bam's good, but like I don't think Lowry or Bam are as good as obviously Jaylen Brown is, and as good as Jimmy Butler is right now. Jason Tatum probably a little bit better than him. So that's the seeding that I see it going down to. But the interesting thing is, like, what seed do you want? Because the Nets could be a 7 or 8 seed. What is an advantageous seed? Are you better off getting a 3 or 4 so you can avoid the Nets in the first round? I mean, what is your thinking as far as where teams would want to be seated?
It's an interesting proposition. I think you definitely want to avoid Brooklyn heading into a 7-game series simply because they have like arguably as talented a roster when healthy, that ever-present caveat with that team. They have a roster that's every bit as good as Philadelphia and Milwaukee, and I think better than Boston and Miami, quite frankly.
Agreed.
So I think you want to avoid that number 2 seed as much as you can, which is going to be kind of interesting as far as like jockeying for position goes. And this is why I mentioned it earlier. I would much rather have, like, in order of seeding, you pick your opponent that you're going to be facing.
Agreed.
Type of thing, because then that actually does reward you a little bit, gets that rivalry storyline going. But I mean, we might see something where Milwaukee's like, you know what? We do have a really tough schedule. Oh no, we might finish in the 3rd seed. And like, yeah, you have to be on the road if you happen to play whoever survives as that 2 seed. But otherwise, you get home court anyway when you get to that matchup in the playoffs. So I think on merit, and actually, like, I think I'll stick with Milwaukee winning it all. I think they'll overcome the tough schedule. I think, like, yeah, if you're the 76ers, I mean, first off, like, how amazing of a first round would that be? Philly and Brooklyn.
Nets.
That would be, like, that's part of the reason why I'm cheering for this. Is just because, like, ultimate story, ultimate, just sure. Like everybody just like hating on everybody. There's just gonna be so much juice to come out of that. But yeah, I think you definitely want to avoid that 2 seed. Because Brooklyn's going to be dangerous as all get out. And I think, like, Brooklyn's clearly better than Cleveland, Charlotte, Atlanta, whoever they're facing in that first game. I don't see them losing that and having to play the 8-9 play-in game. So that's going to be tough. I think you want that seed. I think you want the 1 seed, pretty much just anything but the 2. If you're fighting in that 4-5 matchup, I think that's another favorable one. And I think a lot of teams want to face Chicago, quite frankly. It hurts to say, since you and I are both Bulls fans, like, I've got the Bulls hoodie and everything,
Bulls red.
But nobody's fearing these horns. The Bulls are not a very good defensive team. You can get your buckets against them. And if you want to let DeMar DeRozan put up, 35 points shooting a bunch of mid-range 2s, I think a lot of teams will be happy to do so. So I think that avoid the 2 spot, and I think actually people are going to, teams are going to want that 5 or that 4 spot rather as well.
Okay, so I'm going to go a little different with you here. First off, I'll be honest with you. The way the Bulls are going, Bulls probably will be the 6th seed, possibly the 7. They could even be in the playing game. So I don't even think they're going to get the Bulls. I think the Bulls' best case scenario right now, the way they're trending, is the 6th seed. I think they're the 5 right now, but they're only like a game ahead, I think.
No, they're tied with Toronto.
Okay, so even worse. Even worse.
Yeah, no, the Bulls could actually end up playing the Nets for that 7-8 game, and then ending up in that play-in game.
So now the Nets, though, they would be in the play-in game, but they actually could win the first one and then lose the second one and get an 8 seed. Is that right?
I think it's if you are in the 7, it's the 7-8 and then the 9-10. If you win the 7-8, you are the 7 seed.
Okay.
And then the loser of that 7-8 game faces the winner of 9-10 for the 8th seed.
Right. So it is in theory possible, though, that the Nets could end up as the 8th seed too. It's not impossible. They could lose that first game Obviously, depending on what happens with Toronto, Kyrie Irving wouldn't be allowed to play at Toronto. So
Ooh.
that is something to think about as well. So there's a lot of drama. And with that caveat, that's why I'm going to say that you go for the highest seed. Because in the words of Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. Tell him, Herm. Tell him, Herm. That's how we do it. I think that several years ago, I know they didn't want to admit it, but I think the Clippers set themselves up as a way to avoid the Lakers or something. Then they ended up losing to the Nuggets, I think it was. And then there was a year where they almost lost to the Mavericks and lost later on. I just don't think that that works. You're in this whole thing to win a championship. So you're going to have to beat someone eventually, regardless. And if you're going to be afraid, if that's your mentality that you take, you're going home. So I would say if I'm one of those 4 seeds, I go out there and try to win every game. I try and go out there and get yourself the most rhythm you can down the stretch and get as high of a seed as you're going to get. And then you worry about what happens with the Nets afterwards. Like if it ends up that you're the 2 seed and you play the Nets, well, guess what? You have home court. Guess what? Now the Nets do have home games. So Kyrie is going to play. So that home court disadvantage is now a home court advantage. So if I'm any of those teams, I'm going for the top spot. Like, yeah, I could argue, sure, you're at 3 and 4 as far as the first round. You'd have a harder time. But I'd also argue this. Let me flip this argument, Tom. The Nets, Kyrie and Durant still haven't played together very long. These guys, this team hasn't played together very long. You're better off playing them in the first round. If you think you're legitimately have a squad that's going to win the championship, the Nets are only going to get better as the tournament goes on. So if your thought is, I'm going to win, I have a team that I think can maybe win a ring, I'd rather play them in the first round as opposed to later on in the tournament. And let's be honest, the 76ers, what are the 76ers and Bucks gunning? For both of them, it's win the championship or it's a disappointing season. So whether they lose in the first round or the second round, it's a disappointing season. Harden and Embiid have not won a championship yet. The Sixers have been a 1 seed before, haven't won. The Bucks obviously won last year, so anything less than a title, it's worse than the previous season. I think the Celtics and Heat are maybe not as much pressure, but especially if you're the Sixers and Bucks, like play for that seed, get your spot, and see what happens from there. I just don't like the idea of trying to match up with the team. I do agree with you that we should have, since we have this play-in game, the 1 seed should be allowed to pick who they want to play. That would be a good addition and something I can actually see the NBA doing. I can actually see them doing that. We'll see if that's what happens. But there are no guarantees in the NBA. And I know you talked about the Bulls defense having issues. Well, we talk about all the talent. We have, Irving and Durant who can drop 50 points at any time. The Nets defense is not very good. So and Steve Nash is obviously a great offensive coach, he was not known for his defense in his playing days. And that's kind of how his team is. They're an offensive team. And with the amount of offensive talent, they can beat you on any given day. But you talk about like, if you're the Sixers, if you're the Celtics, you're the Heat, who else? The Bucks. I also feel comfortable that I can score on the Nets at will, because that is how bad the Nets offense is. And I think the league is wide open. Obviously, I might end up picking the Nets in a 7-game series. But I would say this, get your highest seed you can, get your home court. I know home court maybe doesn't matter as much. We've seen road teams doing better than other teams, lately. But I still feel like the comfort, the travel, you just feel a little more comfortable in the playoffs at home. So I would get as high of a seed as you can, not only for the home court, but also so that you're playing your best rhythm. And if you happen to meet the Nets, I'd rather play them now before they've got their rhythm later in the playoffs.
Yeah, and before they're healthy too. That's a really, really good point. No, I agree with you. Like as far as like a competitive balancing, I always want to see teams, playing at their best level to get into the playoffs. And then, you're going to have to earn it one way or another, like you said. So I definitely think
Sure.
that is the way to go. So I think that pretty much wraps up the topics du jour. Now we get into our regular staple segments. We've got locks of the week. We've got sports trivia and statements coming up. So we'll begin with locks, where I could be mistaken, but I think there was some movement atop the standings yet again. We got
Yes,
a little bit
Tom,
of our
you're in
own
first.
Eastern Conference going on for locks of the
Yes.
week.
Yes, you are in first, 61, 52, and 3. Drew is 60, 54, and 2. So you hopped in ahead of Mr. Bracket because you were 3-0 last week. WGC Dell match play. Jordan Spieth rallying to beat Keegan Bradley. You got that one right. Texas A&M -2.5 over Wake Forest in the NIT. Boy, that was good for you. 67-52. And Miami -2.5 over Iowa State. Miami winning 70-56. Huge week for Utah. Didn't even have to sweat out the bets. That is something that very rarely happens, where you go 3-0, and 2 of those 3 you pretty much had the whole way. Drew was 1-2, 1-2. He had the Hurricanes winning over the Lightning in the NHL, winning 3-2. He did have Arizona over Seattle. The Seattle Kraken all of a sudden playing good hockey. They won 4-2. They also won last night. A certain bettor may have cashed in on the over total in that game last night, just saying. And then Drew finally got the NBA one wrong. He had Knicks +2 over the Hawks. Trae Young loves playing the Knicks. Hawks winning 117, 111. Knicks were winning a big part of that game. So not a good close to that game for the Knicks. They closed much better against our Bulls than they did against Atlanta. So 1-2 week for Drew. I should have just put St. Peter's in, man. I gave you a bonus pick on my locks of the week. I went 1-2, 2-2 if you count my bonus. St. Peter's pick covering against Purdue when they won outright. The one I felt best about is the one I got, Duke +1.5 against Texas Tech. Didn't know how they were an underdog. Cashed in on that one elsewhere as well. Duke winning 78-73. Then these next 2 games pretty much busted my bracket. So Arizona -1.5 against Houston. Houston winning 72-60, missed that one. And then UCLA -2.5 over UNC. UNC winning 73-66. UCLA led late in that game. The last few minutes was all UNC. So 1-2 week for me. I'll get right to it for Drew's picks. He went a little Aussie football with his first pick. I actually looked up how to pronounce this. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. The Adelaide Crowns +20.5 versus Port Adelaide in Aussie football. So there you go. There you go, Drew Bracket. I'm
Nicely
sure you can
done.
name exactly 0 players on either of those teams. In fact, maybe he can name 1 Chelsea soccer player. I hope Christian Pulisic, the USA legend, but he had Chelsea Brentford under 2.5 goals. And then I know he can't name anyone in this MLS game. Fire FC Dallas under 2.5. So he's rolling with a lot of interesting picks, stuff he doesn't know much about, but he's done pretty good with the EPL soccer or football in the past. So that's Drew. What do you got this week? I know you have a lot of decisions.
All right, so I'm trying to avoid going with same day stuff. So I'm going to avoid the NIT semifinal of Texas Tech's -2 against Washington State. That's just a little teaser that I think tips off like in a little bit. So
Texas A&M, I think, right?
Did I say Tech? I meant A&M.
Yeah.
So I will go with 2 March Madness picks on April 1st. Give me UConn +1 against Stanford. And then give me, in the other Final Four matchup, give me Louisville +8. I know South Carolina is a really, really good program, like probably better than everybody else. Drew's probably going to clean up on the women's bracket.
No, he won't.
Despite
UConn.
me going, you think UConn?
UConn.
But Louisville certainly no slouch themselves. I'll take 8 points with them. And then this might be like the highest. This might be like the best odds that we've ever had on locks of the week. I'll go with Paolo Banchero for most outstanding player at plus 240.
Ooh.
I don't think we typically kind of hang around that plus to minus 120 range.
Sure.
So I'm gonna go with plus 240. Usually, most outstanding player goes to the top player on the team that wins the championship. And if Duke is going to win the championship, I mean, Paolo Banchero is a big part of that. So far in this tournament, he's led Duke in scoring on 3 out of their 4 games. He's gotten a double-double in that game against Fullerton, shot above 50% in 3 out of the 4 games. Arkansas held him down to 36%. But he's been putting in the stat sheet, points, rebounds, dishing out some assists as well. I think he's probably going to get that most outstanding player if Duke goes ahead and wins it. I think Duke is a better team than UNC, and I think they're going to be able to beat whoever comes out of Villanova, Kansas. So that is what I'm going to go with, and probably regret it. But at plus 240, he's the favorite, but you can still get a little something for him.
Wow, Tom Castleman. I might have to take your picks.
See what I do when I get a little bit of a lead? I get all crazy and put like massive plus money out here.
I'll be honest with you. I agree with all of your picks, and that doesn't happen. I know we tend to have typically 1 or 2 games, but I am 100% in lockstep with you. I didn't realize that Louisville line was +8. I know we both have South Carolina winning that game, yeah. But 2 1 seeds, 8-point line. I'll be completely honest. I haven't watched either of those teams play very much, but it just feels right at +8 as a 1 seed, as a dog for Louisville. I have watched UConn play a little bit. You know how much I love Paige Beckers, so I like them as a 1-point underdog. And I think Paolo Banchero is the best player in this Final Four. He plays for the best team in this Final Four. Obviously, the best player and best team don't always win. But I kind of like that. I might take a lot of your picks and follow through with those.
So long as they're not mortgage bets, you'll be
no
just
mortgage
fine.
bets here. So, all right. So I know that college basketball is winding down. This will be the last locks of the week until maybe early on in next season. But you know how much I don't like betting college basketball early in the season. So I may not have another college basketball pick until 2023. So I'm going to take advantage and just make some picks. Let's have a little fun. The men's tournament is this Saturday. I'm going to pick both games for locks of the week. I'm going to start with this one is I feel very split on this game, both personally for who I want to win. I'm leaning towards wanting UNC because I like UNC. Obviously, we talked about it earlier. I'm a Jordan fan. Jordan went to UNC. I've always liked their program. Dean Smith, I really liked the history of him. Even though I didn't watch him growing up, I just really respect him from having read things. Roy Williams, I have seen. I like Roy Williams. I like Hansborough. I like Lawson. So I really like UNC as a program. I also really like Coach K, if I'm honest. I'm a closet UNC Coach K fan, if there's a such thing. I just, I respect him so much, and I think having Coach K win the tournament would be cool. And then now that he's gone, I can go back to 100% being convinced that I'm cheering against Duke. So I did pick Duke to win the game because I felt like they have the best coach in Hubert Davis, and they've got the best player in Paolo Banchero. But for locks of the week, I'm going to take UNC +4. That way I win at least one of those, because if UNC wins outright, I win my lock. If Duke wins outright, at least know that I've won my pick, and maybe I've won my lock. Maybe I can win both. It was kind of like the Super Bowl. I picked the Bengals to cover, Rams to win. I'm hoping this is a similar type situation. I think UNC is a great rebounding team, and their rebounding is going to keep them in any game. So I don't think they're prone to be blown out in this game. The two teams obviously know each other really well. I think it's going to go down to one possession in the last minute. It'll be anyone's ball game. Really, the only way I think I can lose this bet is if UNC's, maybe down 3, they miss a 3, Duke makes 2 free throws at the end, which is probably what's going to happen, knowing my luck.
Speak it into existence.
Yeah, I do like Tar Heels a +4. I'm going to go with the other underdog. You know, with all these upsets, something that has worked for me betting on this tournament is looking at the team who's the underdog and not necessarily picking them to win, but picking them to cover the line. That's something that's worked very well for me betting on this tournament. So I'm going to go Villanova plus 4.5 against Kansas because I actually think Villanova is going to win outright. I talked about this earlier. Jay Wright is a much better coach than Bill Self. You know, Self has struggled in the Elite Eight. He's won only one national championship. Kansas has had a cakewalk. They beat a 16 seed, a 9 seed without its best player, an overachieving Providence team, and then a 10 seed. Villanova's more battle-tested. They beat the great Houston team. And I like Connor Gillespie, fifth-year senior. He was a freshman, I think, on that national championship team that won it all a few years back in 2018 for Nova. So Jay Wright, the better coach. The fifth-year senior, Connor Gillespie, a plus 4.5 points. I feel really, really good about this one. And then I'm going to end it with a homer bias pick. And my homer bias picks have not gone very well. I will preface this. They have not gone very well in the past. And I actually, you know, I'm going to go with it, though. I like, speaking of plus money, Argentina, plus 105 World Cup qualifying against Ecuador tonight. That one is kicking off here in about 25 minutes. Last time Argentina played at Ecuador was that game that Messi scored 3 goals to get him into the 2018 World Cup. Last 4 times they've played, Argentina has won all of them. Both teams already qualified for the World Cup. So Ecuador, as the underdog, won't park the bus. I expect an open and fun game. Messi excels in this scenario when teams aren't just defending nonstop. Argentina has more talented players to win an open game. They've got 11 wins and 5 ties in qualifying, so more likely they win than draw. They are the favorite as a winner, but obviously for betting purposes, this is over 90 minutes. There's no extra time. Ecuador is at home. That's why the line is only plus 105, because you have like plus something for the tie and then plus something for Ecuador's win. So I will take Argentina money line. Argentina wins straight up over Ecuador tonight, Tuesday night. And then if you're watching later, I know we post this, you know, by the time people are watching this, you do have time to cash in on Villanova and cash in on UNC. So those are my locks.
Absolutely. Moving on to sports trivia. I don't think I have anything. So if you have a trivia, I'd be glad to take a puzzle over it.
Yeah, so you're doing pretty good on this one. You know, I have another job where I host a sports podcast, selling sports memorabilia. We have a lot of fun stats and, you know, trivia gets thrown around there. So every once in a while, when I hear a fun trivia question there, I use it to put it into this show. A lot of times I come up with something different. This one, I think you'll do fairly well on most of these teams, but I think you'll miss a couple. So this will be an interesting one for you. So because it is the NCAA tournament, you and I like storylines. You know, we like to do current trivia, etc. So this isn't specific to the tournament. This is just all-time wins period, but it is specific to college basketball. No particular order. I can give you the order when we're done. But can you name the 10 winningest college basketball programs? I think you'll do great with 7 or 8. There's about 2 to 3 that might trip you up. So go ahead and knock off the easy ones first.
Okay, so UCLA is going to be one of them. Duke is going to be one of them.
Yep.
North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so it's like the big main ones.
You're forgetting the one that has the second most wins ever. You've gotten the 4 biggest blue bloods. You're missing one more really, really big blue blood.
Indiana.
Not the one I was thinking of, but they're actually 10th on this list.
They haven't been good in like a long, long time.
Exactly. So you have Kansas, UNC, UCLA, and Indiana. So Kansas is in a 1 spot. UNC 3rd most wins ever. Duke is 4th. UCLA is 7th. They haven't done well in recent years either. And then Indiana is 10th. You're missing probably the best what I consider the best college basketball program ever, because they are one win behind Kansas. They got a better win percentage. They've got the second most national titles. So they're number 2 in pretty much every category. And you take that into consideration, maybe make them 1 overall.
Why am I blanking on a program that's like so obviously good?
It's funny because you picked them to do pretty good this tournament.
Oh, is it Gonzaga?
Not Gonzaga.
Oh, okay.
Again, I'll list off the ones you
Kentucky.
had. Maybe I misheard you.
No, Kentucky.
Kentucky, yes. Kentucky.
I was going to say, like, Gonzaga, they don't typically do all that well.
No, it's not Gonzaga. So you have 1 through 4 on all-time wins, and you have 7 in UCLA and 10 in Indiana. So there's 4 more you're missing. These are the 4 that I thought you might struggle with. One of them I know you're going to get. 2 of them maybe, but there's 2 here that I think you're going to struggle with.
I'm going to go like old school Big East, like Georgetown, Syracuse.
Syracuse
is on there. Georgetown's
not. I thought
not.
you'd get that one because of Jim Boeheim. You did not get Georgetown. It's funny because when we did this game at work, I got 8 of them. Like I got 7 right away. I missed 1. Like I guessed Villanova and I missed them. And then I was told Big East and I was like Syracuse. Then I had said Georgetown, didn't get it. Then it's another Big East team that I got after a little bit.
Another Big East team. So that'd be like St. John's.
St. John's. 9th all time. They were really good. They haven't done anything in a while.
Long time. That was like Chris Mullen era. Like they were really, really good.
Correct. So you're missing 2. One of them, I just don't know that you're going to get.
I might. Like, I might.
I got them because I've actually seen this list before. And when I saw this list, I felt like there was one team that didn't belong in my head. So that's why I remember this one.
It's like is it some like school that like is a big name but not that great? So like a Texas?
Not Texas.
Maybe Florida?
Nope.
Maybe Big Ten, like Michigan, Ohio State?
Not a Big Ten school.
Oh, not even like Wisconsin not up there? Wow. What about like a Washington? Go
not
Pac-12.
Washington.
No? Are they in one of the Power 5 conferences?
I believe that they re-entered the Power 5. I think they were, then they weren't, and I think they re-entered.
I don't know if I'm going to get these last 2 then.
What?
I'm not sure I'm going to get these last 2 then, because like I could see you just like rattle off schools, but I don't think that's going to be very entertaining.
One of them I think you can get, and I can't give you a clue to that because it's just going to give it away. There's one very easy clue, but like one of these 2 programs is very much a big name university. The other one is very much not a big name university. That's the one way to think of it, I guess.
Not a big name university, but has a lot of wins.
And you would not associate them with college football whatsoever.
Football or basketball?
Football. That's your clue.
Would not associate them with football.
And the other one you would associate with football. So this is not a power conference team. Not a power conference team. I think that at one point they might, I got to look this up, but I think they were a Big East school at one point. But they are not a Power 5 conference team right now. Maybe they've never been.
Butler, maybe?
Not Butler. Oh, you know what? They were an independent way back in the day.
Okay.
And then, holy cow. And this is why they're up there, because they've been around forever. Holy moly.
Oh, it's like a Yale, Princeton?
Not Yale. So actually, I don't think they've ever been a power conference team.
Harvard?
Not Harvard.
I'm probably not going to get it. I'll yield.
Okay, you'll yield. All right, well, maybe you can get the power conference team. Because this is,
power conference not associated with football.
Correct. No, the power conference is associated with football.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. There you go.
Okay. It's going to be like Notre Dame, maybe Alabama, Oklahoma.
Eighth. Notre Dame is 8th on the all-time wins list.
So then who's 6th? Is that the team that I'm missing?
You're missing the 5th.
Never been. They've been independent, but never in a power conference.
No, so they've been in a conference since you and I would have watched. They've been in a lower conference. They were independent way back in the day. So they were in a specific conference, and then now they've moved to another non-power conference.
Yeah, just give it to me. I don't know.
Let me see. So they've made, they literally, like, it's crazy they're so high. Like, they've made 2 Final Fours ever. They're both in the 50s. Wow. Last time they were in the Sweet 16 was 2001. So they've not done anything special in recent years.
That's probably why I'm not thinking about them then.
They have a certain John Chaney was their coach for a while and did quite well, if that helps you at all.
That does not help me.
He almost like beat up Coach Cal during a press conference. That John Chaney.
Nope, got nothing.
All right, the Temple Owls.
I would not have got that in a million guesses.
They've been around forever.
Wow.
The only reason I knew that because I remember looking at that list before and saying that's the one school that doesn't belong.
Yeah.
Temple.
Yeah, that sounds like they don't belong.
Sure. All right. Well, hey, that does it for trivia. Statements, salutes, etc. I've got 2. One will be we'll probably agree with both. They're not highly controversial, but you can start if you want.
Well, I do have something that is controversial, maybe news breaking as far as I'm concerned.
It's probably the same as mine.
I found out today, actually I found out yesterday, I'm not a real White Sox fan.
What?
I'm not a real White Sox fan. You see, like, I was mistaken because I'm sitting here looking at, Andrew Vaughn, a first baseman that they drafted out of college, not really known as any sort of like defensive player, and they had him out in right field, and they've been platooning him with this guy named Gavin Sheets out in right field, another first baseman, and Tony La Russa said something that illuminated me to my existence, and this is a quote from Dale Van Schouwen, a beat reporter for the White Sox. He tweeted, "Fans who want the White Sox to go outside the organization, so free agency or trade, to get another right fielder, quote, are probably not White Sox," close quote, Tony La Russa said. Quote, "White Sox fans know we have guys in this camp who can handle it." So you can imagine, the fugue I've been walking through the past 24 hours upon finding out that my fanhood identity has been mistaken. I don't know what to say. It's been incredibly difficult for me to make it through the show today with this identity crisis, which I now find myself. I think I just have to concede the floor. I have to cede the floor to you and let you take the show from here. I'm quite distraught to find out about my true identity.
That sounds like something Tony La Russa would say. So
he's the baseball police, and I hate it. I hate the baseball police.
I'm not a fan of Tony La Russa myself either. I know he's achieved a lot in the past, but it's 2022, and just gotta have a little fun, lighten up, and don't have fun by drinking and driving, because that is not fun, Tony. Lighten up otherwise.
It's okay,
have a little fun.
But it is okay if you are a Hall of Fame baseball person, according to Tony La Russa.
Did he say that?
That's what he said during, as he was pulled over. He was talking to the police officer, and there's recording of him saying, "Do you know who I am? I'm a Hall of Fame baseball person." It's you can't even remember the reason by which you're in the Hall of Fame. That's how blitzed you are. I mean, it's just patently absurd. I'm a fan of a team that I want to do exceptionally well, and they haven't really addressed all the needs to make them achieve their highest goal. They're in go for it mode. They brought Tony La Russa out of retirement. You do that for one purpose and one purpose only. That's to win a World Series. Why aren't you taking every opportunity and avenue available to you to bulletproof your team? So just a really condescending, disheartening comment from a guy that I don't like personally, and I want the White Sox to win in spite of him.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on all of that. And actually, the White Sox, I don't know if he's part of the problem, but they haven't done anything in free agency. We did our free agency special last week. I think they've actually gotten worse. Didn't they lose Carlos Rodon?
Yeah, they lost Carlos Rodon to free agency and did not replace him.
Okay, there you go. So enough said. Real quickly, actually, I thought of a third. I'm going to do three things.
Go for it.
The first one will be really, really quick. More of like a shout out. Talking about Tony La Russa just popped in my head. Didn't even have this written down, but Cardinals added Albert Pujols on a one-year deal. They do now have a DH, I believe, in the whole league, right, Tom? Am I correct?
Correct.
DH in the National League as well. Albert Pujols doesn't hit for average like he used to, but he actually hit for power the last two seasons really, really well. I think he could be a very good pickup for a designated hitter. Maybe he starts half the games at DH. Obviously, you can pinch hit him too into DH. You need a little spot first base here and there. You can play that as well. So I thought it was cool for him coming home. I think the Cardinals are kind of in a position where they should win a weak division, but they're not a legitimate contender to win it all. So with that in mind, I think it makes sense to bring in one of your legends, who, by the way, is 21 home runs away from 700. That's going to be a tough order this season, but not entirely impossible. Imagine hitting his 700th home run ever at Busch Stadium. That would be cool. So I thought that was a good move for the Cardinals. Cool to see. And then got a couple NFL things because it is the National Football League. We talked a lot about it last week. And this trade happened after our show. So I want to get my 2 cents in on this Tyreek Hill trade. Here is my statement. And I have more modern NFL after this. I have 2 NFL things. So my statement to Tyreek Hill is, first off, I'll say this, we all have the right to do what we think is best for us. So me saying this, Tyreek Hill's his own man. He can make his own decision. But if you've seen some of the off-field stuff he's done in the past, he has not been known for the best decisions in his life. And my personal opinion, this is a sports talk show. We are here to make our opinions known. So Tyreek, if you're watching, do your own life, man. You don't have to listen to me. But I think Tyreek Hill made a terrible decision leaving the Kansas City Chiefs. I think going to Miami and New York, which were the 2 teams interested, he chose Miami, who is better than the Jets. That was, of those 2, a smarter move. But Miami Dolphins, yes, they have Jalen Waddle. There is some potential for those 2 receivers to be good. But the Dolphins are not a legitimate Super Bowl contender. He went to Miami for the money, and I give him props for admitting it. He even said that in his press conference. He saw what Devontae Adams got. He's like, I'm a top 5 level receiver. I want to get that as well. I didn't think it was a smart move for him. I really did not, because I think he is never going to play with a better quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes, I have him as the greatest quarterback of all time, talent-wise. We'll see where he ends up by the time his career is done. But even if he ends up let's lowball it, top 5 quarterback of all time, the odds of Tyreek Hill playing with a better quarterback are very low. Andy Reid, he's got the 2nd, 3rd most wins in playoff history. He's got a Super Bowl, a lot of division titles, right on the borderline of a top 5 coach of all time, maybe number 2 among active coaches behind Bill Belichick. And Bieniemy's a great OC. He is not going to play with a better quarterback, a better coach, and a better team for the rest of his life. I know he sees the money. He's got the dollar signs, and obviously that's what he's interested in. But I felt like he was in the perfect spot in Kansas City. He had a great quarterback, a great coach, a city that, quite frankly, loved him, even despite his off-field issues. So he was in such a good spot. for him in Kansas City that I just didn't think it was a good move. I get it. Like, I get that he wants more money, and I get that the Chiefs can't pay him what he wants because they paid Mahomes a lot. They got to hold on to Kelsey. Of those three, as good as Hill is, I still think of him as the number three in that holy trinity, as I call it. But I think for him, it was just not a smart move. He's also a little bit younger than Kelsey, so I think in a few years, he'll be the clear number one if he already isn't. So he's just not going to win as much in Miami. He's not going to have the same type of ability for commercials, etc. Like, I just didn't think it was a smart move for him. Who am I to judge? But personally, I think the cheetah got money hungry, and life is about more than money. My personal thought. I know it sounds biased as a Chiefs fan, but I just think he didn't make the right decision. That's the difference between him and like Davante Adams went for cash, but Davante Adams went to a team with a proven quarterback, albeit inconsistent, a quarterback he played with before in college, and a team that was actually in the playoffs last year. I know the Dolphins had a solid record, but they've got one of the longest playoff droughts. So I just didn't think it was a smart move for Tyreek Hill.
Well, I mean, how important should winning be to a player who already has a Super Bowl ring? You know what I mean?
That would be the question.
And I also think part of the equation for him is like, I think his home is in Miami. So for him, he's just like, oh, I get to stay here year round. I mean, weather's certainly better, especially, like look at that playoff game against the Bills. Wouldn't you rather play that one in South Beach? Like, I get like from a pure football winning perspective, like, yeah, he's probably taking a step back type of thing. But I mean, if we could get paid millions upon millions of dollars to play in our hometown and enjoy really nice weather, I can't fault him all that much for it, especially because he already has the Super Bowl ring, which doesn't really seem to matter as much for like wide receivers as it does for quarterbacks. Like, quarterback is like the one position in football where that matters. For receiver, maybe not so much. He's just like, I've got the ring. Now I'm going to get the bag and the nice weather, and I'm just going to live the lifestyle now, like relatively free of pressure, kind of like a Chris Bryant situation almost out in Colorado.
Yeah, again, it's just skepticism. Like, it's just we all have our own opinions, but I feel like you're going from, like, numbers wise, this might hurt him too, because he's going from a Patrick Mahomes to a Tua. Like, I think like his marketability and his numbers take a hit. I don't know. I see this as a cash grab, and I'm not a big fan of cash grabs personally. And why has Tom Brady been so great for so many years? I know I spent time over here, like maybe saying he's a little overrated because he is still a human being, not a god, like people treat him. But Tom Brady has the respect of people because he actually didn't take as massive of a quarterback deal as he could have. He took those deals so he can get himself better players and win. And Tom Brady saw that long term. That's why Tom Brady is like a brilliant football mind. And I don't know. It just rubbed me wrong the way Hill did. One positive thing in my mind going on in the NFL, you probably saw this, Tom. Maybe you didn't. It did break today. They are changing the overtime rule. Obviously, a lot of people were upset when Josh Allen didn't get a second chance to come right back at Pat Mahomes after that touchdown for the Chiefs in that crazy overtime win against the Bills. All those touchdowns in the last few minutes of that game in regulation too. So they changed the rule. What I thought was really interesting about it is that they changed it just for the playoffs. So they're going to allow each team to have one possession. They're only going to allow it in the playoffs. That will not stay in the regular season, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, we had the statistics here on the show. The team that gets the ball first tends to win, although the Chiefs didn't against the Bengals, which is, interesting enough in itself. But you get the ball first in overtime, your odds are much higher to win because we have a lot of great quarterbacks. We have rules catered to the offenses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately, even though the Chiefs won out against the Bills, they did lose that scenario against the Patriots a few years ago. I did think even at the time as a Chiefs fan, I thought it was unjust. I think both quarterbacks deserve a chance to get a touchdown and respond. So I'm glad they changed the rule. I would actually go ahead and change it for the regular season. I get why they don't want that because they want
Hmm.
shorter games, less chances of injury. My thought is make it universal. But I did think it was, I guess, a step in the right direction by the NFL with this rule change, even though Mike Tomlin doesn't like it. Did you see his
I think
interview?
I didn't see his
Oh,
interview
okay.
on that. I saw the rule change come down, and I mean, like basically, what this rule does is that the team that still wins the coin toss still has like a pretty big advantage because you go down, you score a touchdown. Like let's just say Patrick Mahomes leads the Chiefs to a touchdown. Josh Allen leads the Bills to a touchdown. Well, now Patrick Mahomes just has to lead Kansas City to a field goal, and then it's sudden death after that point. You know what I mean? Like it's still putting way too much emphasis on the flip of a piece of metal.
Yes. So, and that would be
So like
my
that's
next step. And I want to make sure I
yeah.
understood this correctly. If you score, the other team should have a chance to score again, period. And
Mhm.
that would be the next step. I know that comes into college overtime rules, which
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
like better. College overtime rules to me are better than the NFL. Actually, college just took a step back because after, I can't remember, is it two overtimes,
After
whatever it
two
is.
overtimes, you have to go for 2 point conversions.
Well, no, now they go for 2 point conversions. They don't keep going for touchdowns. I don't know if you saw that. It was this season, and I
Oh,
completely missed it. And I
I
saw it
missed
in
that
the
too. Yeah.
Alabama Auburn game. Yeah, after like the first, I think, two possessions. Don't quote me on this. Look this up online.
Hmm.
But they don't keep going from the 25. At one point, they just start going from the two, just going for two.
That's getting like really, really gimmicky. Like to
Yes,
my
it's
mind,
very
like
gimmicky. I thought the college system had it right where they
yeah.
all start from the 25, and college has since messed up its overtime rules with these new changes. So I would like the
Mhm.
NFL, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, you get a touchdown, the other team gets a chance to get a touchdown. Now you get a field goal, the other team either gets a field goal to tie it again, or they get a
Mhm.
touchdown to win it. If they get nothing, obviously they lose. That makes sense. But I feel like you should be able to match the other opponent. And if that results in a long game, it's a classic game. Let's
Well,
go. I'm fine with it. And then this
I
would be
guess,
this
yeah.
would be just for postseason because keep
Mhm.
it in the same way for the regular season. They could end in a tie after 10 minutes. So basically, both teams get a chance to score. Chances are after that, it would be tied. I'm not saying you need to have marathon regular season games,
Mhm.
but a marathon playoff game sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. And maybe after, like, you've each gotten chances, maybe then force them to go for two. But I do think that there shouldn't be an advantage. A game should not be decided by a coin flip. Mike Tomlin, on the other hand, will argue that you had 60 minutes to win the game, so you have no right to be mad, which is a great argument to be made. That's
Mhm.
something that, in soccer, you have penalty kicks. But in soccer, obviously, you can go forever without scoring. So, these guys
Exactly.
can't play forever in soccer. But just a lot of great things to think about as far as the overtime rules. But I don't like the coin toss having any say in who wins personally.
It should just be spot and choose. One team places, decides where the ball is. The other team decides if they want to go on offense or go on defense. And
Agreed.
like that's the most fair and equitable way of doing it. Honestly, I'd be okay if they got rid of overtime in the regular season as well, and just kind of like
Sure.
end on ties. Because like if you're going to have these guys playing now 17, and eventually the league's going to push for 18 games, if you can't get done in 60, then just end it right there. Like we don't like another 10 is not going to definitively decide who is the better
I'm okay
team in
with
that
that.
instance. So
I'm okay with
so
that.
yeah, like
Just
good on
just
the
just as long as in the playoffs your season isn't ending because of a coin flip, because that just doesn't seem just.
exactly. Exactly.
So, all right. Well, hey, that'll do it, Tom. I think next week we'll have our MLB season preview. MLB
Mhm.
starting next Thursday. We'll have our championship recaps on the men's and ladies side. And in addition, we will also be talking about maybe final NBA playoff seeding. We'll go down to the wire and think about this next show, talking about the final week of the NBA regular season. The following show, we'll be doing NBA playoff predictions.
Mhm.
So a lot of good stuff coming up in the weeks to come I got to go watch the Argentina soccer game, edit the show, and have a fun night. But let's go Messi in Argentina. And hopefully you got yourself a great night, Tom. Looking forward to talking with you more sports next week.
Sounds great, Cameron. Have a good evening, everybody.
You too. And everyone at home as well.